0347 hours. Nevada desert. Captain Lila Brennan lay face down in a depression of sand and rock, the thermal scope of her Mk-12 rifle pressed against her right eye socket. The night air cut through her camouflage at 28 degrees, cold enough to make every breath visible, cold enough to keep her sharp. Through the greenish glow of the thermal optic, she counted bodies. 13 heat signatures clustered around the mock village 600 meters south. 13 men she had trained with, eaten with, trusted with her life in a dozen operations across 3 continents. Good soldiers, the best America had. Then there was number 14. The 14th signature moved differently, carried his weight wrong, held his rifle at an angle that spoke of different training, different muscle memory, different origin. Lila's finger rested parallel to the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. Not yet. But her heart rate had climbed from 58 to 72 beats per minute, and her breathing had shifted from the automatic calm of observation to something harder, something that tasted like copper in the back of her throat. She knew with absolute certainty that 13 of those men below were American soldiers playing a game. And she knew with the same cold clarity that one of them was not. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of creosote and diesel fuel. Somewhere in the darkness behind her, a coyote called to its pack. The sound was lonely and ancient and utterly indifferent to the machinery of war scattered across this stretch of federal land. Lila did not move, did not blink, did not breathe harder than necessary. She simply watched the 14th man through her scope and calculated how long it would take her to put a 77-grain hollow point through his center mass, if the moment demanded it. 3.2 seconds, maybe less. But that was not the question keeping her awake on this freezing November night in the high desert. The question was simpler and infinitely more complicated. Who would believe her when she told them? 42 hours earlier, the briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base had smelled like coffee and confidence. 29 officers sat in folding chairs arranged in a semicircle, their uniforms crisp, their faces eager. This was the culmination of 16 months of planning. Exercise Grey Wolf, a joint service operation designed to test the absolute limits of what a small team could accomplish when every system, every advantage, every safety net had been stripped away. Colonel Wade Pritchard stood at the front of the room like a monument to 3 decades of service. 61 years old, silver-haired, with a face carved from hard decisions and harder years. He wore no decorations on his field uniform, but every person in that room knew his record. Mogadishu, Fallujah, Abbottabad, the operations that made the history books and the ones that would remain classified until every participant was dead and buried. He let the silence build before he spoke. "Gentlemen, lady," his eyes found Lila in the 3rd row. "Welcome to the most realistic training you will ever experience outside of actual combat. For the next 36 hours, you will operate in the Nevada test and training range under conditions designed to break you. No external oversight. No safety observers within 50 kilometers. No extraction unless someone dies, and maybe not even then." A few nervous laughs. Pritchard did not smile. "Half of you will be blue team. Your mission is to assault a fortified position, neutralize hostile forces, and extract high-value targets within the time limit. The other half will be red team, defenders. Your job is to prevent that from happening by any means necessary within the rules of engagement." He paused. "Captain Brennan will command red team." Lila felt 14 pairs of eyes shift to her. She kept her face neutral, her posture relaxed. She had expected this. Pritchard always put her in the hardest position, always pushed her further than he pushed anyone else. Some of the men thought it was because he doubted her. Lila knew better. He pushed her because she could take it. "Major Hale will command blue team." Across the room, Devin Hale nodded once. 38 years old, former Delta operator, now transitioning to intelligence work, methodical, deadly, and absolutely convinced that planning beat improvisation every single time. Lila had worked with him twice before. They respected each other the way two predators respect each other when they are not currently hunting the same prey. Pritchard continued. The village is equipped with full-spectrum training systems, laser engagement, pyrotechnic simulators, role players acting as civilian hostages. You will use blank ammunition and laser designators. Injuries should be minimal. Death should be impossible, but I want you to treat this as real. I want you to make decisions that hurt. I want you to fail in ways that teach you something. He pulled up a satellite image on the screen behind him. The mock village sat in a shallow valley surrounded by rocky hills. A single dirt road led in from the north. No other cover for 5 kilometers in any direction. It was a kill box, pure and simple. Captain Brennan, you have 12 personnel. Limited ammunition, limited supplies. You hold for 36 hours. If Major Hale's team breaches the inner perimeter before time expires, you lose. If you repel them, you win. Simple. Nothing about this was simple. Lila raised her hand. Rules of engagement, sir. Standard force-on-force protocols. No headshots. No contact within arm's length unless using pugil sticks. Medical evacuation if anyone sustains injury requiring more than field treatment. He looked directly at her. And one additional rule. I need you to play dirty, Captain. I need you to do things that make Blue Team angry. If they are not furious with you by hour 20, you are not doing your job. The room went quiet. This was unusual. Training exercises emphasized professionalism, restraint, building trust across units. Pritchard was asking her to burn bridges. Understood, sir. Good, your red team roster is on your tablet. Memorize faces and names. You depart in 6 hours. Questions. There were always questions. Logistics, communications protocols, casualty procedures. Lila listened with half her attention while studying the 12 faces on her screen. Young specialists, experienced sergeants, one staff sergeant named Marcus Venn who she vaguely recognized from a joint training event 2 years ago. Drone operator, good reputation, quiet. When the briefing ended, Pritchard caught her arm as she walked past. A word, Captain. They stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional nothing that military facilities perfected. Pritchard waited until the last officer had left before he spoke, and when he did, his voice was different. Lower, more personal. This one is different, Lila. He never used her first name. Not in 15 years of knowing her, training her, pushing her through Ranger School and Combat Controller qualification, and a dozen schools that did not officially exist. The shift in tone made her straighten her spine. Different how, sir? I cannot tell you that, not yet, but I need you to understand something. He looked at her with those pale blue eyes that had seen too many things. You are going to doubt yourself out there. You are going to think you are wrong, that you are seeing things, that the stress is making you paranoid. When that happens, I need you to trust one thing above everything else. What is that? Your eyes, not the voices on the radio, not the orders, not what everyone else believes, what you see with your own eyes. He gripped her shoulder once briefly. Can you do that? Lila did not hesitate. Yes, sir. Good, now go win my exercise. She should have asked more questions, should have pushed for clarification. But Pritchard had a way of making you feel like doubt was failure, and Lila Brennan had been running from the accusation of failure her entire life. The sun was setting behind the Spring Mountains when the trucks dropped Red Team at the village. 12 soldiers plus Lila. They had 6 hours to prepare defenses before Blue Team would begin their approach. The village itself was a Hollywood version of Afghanistan. Mud brick walls, flat roofs, narrow alleys designed for ambush. Scattered among the buildings were mannequins dressed in civilian clothes, standing in frozen poses of normal life. Hostages, complications, human shields if you were willing to use them. Lila gathered her team in the central square as the last light drained from the sky. Listen up, we are outnumbered 16 to 13. Blue team has better equipment and Major Hale is no idiot. Our advantages are position and time. We make them pay for every meter. We make them second-guess every corner. We make them so tired and frustrated that they make mistakes. She looked at each face. No heroes, no stupid risks. This is about teamwork and discipline. Questions. Sergeant Marcus Venn raised his hand. He was tall, maybe 6 feet even, with dark hair cut high and tight, and a face that seemed perpetually squinting against sun that was not there. Row on pyrotechnics, ma'am. Standard training loads, flash bangs, smoke, trip flares, nothing lethal. She paused. But the colonel wants us to make this memorable, so get creative. Venn nodded. Something in his expression was hard to read. Lila made a mental note and moved on. They worked through the night. Barricades in the alleys, fighting positions on the roofs, claymore simulators covering the approaches. One team set up a communications post in the largest building. Another team prepared medical supplies and ration distribution. Lila walked the perimeter 3 times, checking sight lines, identifying weaknesses, imagining how Hale would come at them. Around 0200, she found Venn at the northern edge of the village, crouched beside a cluster of rocks. He had a small shovel and appeared to be burying something. "Sergeant, what are you doing?" He looked up, startled. For just a moment, something moved behind his eyes, something that might have been fear or might have been calculation. Then it was gone. "Improvised pyrotechnic, ma'am, pressure trigger. When they come up this draw, it will give us early warning." "Show me." He hesitated, actually hesitated. A trained soldier does not hesitate when a superior officer gives a direct order. Lila felt something cold move through her stomach. "Sergeant, show me now." Venn reached down and carefully lifted the device. It was cylindrical, about the size of a coffee can, wrapped in green tape, standard training pyrotechnic casing. Lila took it from his hands. The weight was wrong, too heavy. She turned it over, found the manufacturer's stamp. Her breath stopped. This was not a simulator. This was live ordnance. Actual C4 explosive with an actual blasting cap and an actual pressure trigger that would actually kill anyone who stepped on it. "Where did you get this?" "Supply provided it, ma'am, for realism." "Realism." She kept her voice level. "You are telling me someone authorized live explosives in a training exercise?" "Yes, ma'am, special edition, eyes only, increases pressure on blue team." This was wrong. Every protocol, every safety regulation, every lesson learned from decades of training accidents screamed that this was catastrophically wrong. You did not mix live ordnance with training operations. You did not put real explosives in a simulated environment. People died that way. Good people. Young soldiers who trusted that the system would keep them safe. But Venn said it was authorized. And Pritchard had said this exercise was different. And Lila was being asked to play dirty, to push boundaries, to make people angry. She keyed her radio. Encrypted channel directly to the control tower where Pritchard was monitoring. "Control, this is Red Actual. I have a safety concern. Request immediate clarification on ordnance authorization." Static, then Pritchard's voice, calm and certain. "Red Actual, this is Control. Confirm you have discovered enhanced realism packages. Those items are approved at classification level Echo 7. Part of the exercise parameters. Your concern is noted and disregarded. Continue mission. Classification level Echo 7. That was above her clearance. That meant decisions made by people who never touched a rifle, never felt the spray of someone else's blood across their face, never had to write letters to mothers explaining why their sons were not coming home. But it also meant authorized, legal, part of the plan. Lila looked at Ven, then at the explosive in her hands, then at the dark hills surrounding the village where in a few hours, 16 American soldiers would come walking through with training mindsets and blank ammunition, and the absolute certainty that they were safe. Understood control, read actual out. She handed the device back to Ven. Mark the location on the tactical map. I want every single enhanced package documented with GPS coordinates. If someone gets hurt, I want to know exactly where and exactly why. Yes, ma'am. She walked away feeling like she had just made a terrible mistake, but could not articulate what it was. The feeling followed her through the pre-dawn hours as the team completed preparations. Followed her as the sun rose over the desert, turning the sand from black to gold to white under a sky so blue it hurt. Followed her as the radio crackled with Major Hale's voice announcing Blue Team's approach. Red Team, this is Blue Actual. We are beginning our advance. May the best team win. Lila keyed her handset. Blue Actual, Red Actual, come ahead. We are ready for you. And they were. Defensive positions manned. Overlapping fields of fire established. Communications tight. 13 soldiers against 16, but Lila had the ground and the fortifications and the knowledge that Hale would be cautious, methodical by the book. The attack came at 0830. Blue Team approached from two directions simultaneously, using the draws and gullies for cover, suppressing fire from the hills. Smoke grenades to mask their movement. Textbook assault on a defended position. Lila watched through binoculars from the highest roof and called adjustments to her teams. Contact north, 2 squads, shift 3rd team to reinforce the barricade. Laser designators painted targets. The training system registered hits and near misses, beeping to indicate which soldiers were theoretically wounded or dead. One of her corporals took a simulated hit to the leg and began play acting the injury, dragging himself back from the wall. Good discipline. Good realism. Then the shooting started for real. Lila heard it before she understood it. The sharp crack of live ammunition, not the duller pop of blanks. She spun toward the sound. Saw one of the Blue Team soldiers, a specialist she recognized from the briefing, stumbling backward with red spreading across his chest. Not red paint, not laser indicator. Red blood pumping from a hole that should not exist. The specialist fell, hit the ground hard, did not get back up. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Training and reality collided in that frozen moment. This was an exercise. This was supposed to be safe. But there was a man bleeding in the dirt and the blood was very definitely real. Lila was moving before conscious thought caught up. She vaulted the roof edge, hit the ground running, crossed the 30 meters to the wounded man in 8 seconds. Other soldiers were converging, blue and red both, the artificial boundaries of the exercise evaporating in the face of actual casualty. She dropped to her knees beside the specialist. Entry wound high right chest, sucking sound when he breathed. Tension pneumothorax if they did not seal it fast. Her hands moved automatically, tearing open his vest, applying pressure, calling for the medic. Who shot, who fired? Faces turned toward each other. Confusion, denial, then someone pointed. Then I saw Ven's muzzle flash. Lila's head snapped up. Sergeant Marcus Ven stood 20 meters away, rifle in his hands, expression unreadable behind his eye protection. He had not moved to help, had not dropped his weapon. had not done anything a soldier does when a training accident just killed or crippled a fellow American. Then, weapon down now. He complied, setting the rifle against a wall, moved with deliberate calm toward the cluster of soldiers around the wounded man. The medic arrived with his kit, pushing Lila aside, working fast to seal the wound and start an IV. The specialist was conscious but going into shock, skin pale, lips blue. Lila keyed her radio with blood-slick hands. "Control, this is Red Actual. We have a real-world casualty. Gunshot wound to the chest. Request immediate medical evacuation." She expected instant response, expected helicopters spinning up, emergency protocols activating, the entire exercise slamming to a halt while they saved this kid's life. But the radio gave her only static. She switched to the emergency frequency. Any station, this is Captain Brennan requesting immediate medevac for gunshot trauma. Coordinates follow." More static, then a voice but not Pritchard, someone she did not recognize. "Captain Brennan, we are experiencing communications difficulties. Stand by for relay." "Negative, this is Priority Alpha. I need dust-off now." "Stand by." The medic looked up at her, and she saw it in his eyes. This specialist was dying. They had minutes, maybe less. The sealed wound had bought time, but not enough, not without real surgical intervention and blood products, and a level of medical care you could not provide in the middle of nowhere with a training kit. Lila grabbed the specialist's hand. His eyes found hers. Young eyes, maybe 23 years old, maybe from Nebraska or Georgia or California, maybe with a girl back home who sent him letters, maybe with parents who still worried every time he deployed. His lips moved. She leaned close. "What?" Then the word came out wet, bubbling. "Not roster." "What do you mean, not roster?" But his eyes were unfocusing. The medic pushed her back, working frantically. Lila stood, turned, scanned for Ven, found him standing at the edge of the group. She moved toward him, every sense screaming. "Sergeant Ven, I need to see your identification." "Ma'am." "Your ID right now." He reached for his vest pocket. Slow, too slow. Lila's hand moved to her sidearm, a Sig Sauer M17 that was very definitely loaded with live ammunition because officers always carried live, always had that final option if everything went completely wrong. Her fingers touched the grip. Ven produced his military ID card, handed it over. Lila looked at the photo. Marcus Ven, Staff Sergeant, drone operator assigned to Creech Air Force Base. Everything correct, everything proper. She looked at the face on the card, looked at the face in front of her. They were not the same person. Close, very close. Same general features, same coloring. But the man on the ID card was 5'11" according to the printed stats. The man standing in front of her was at least 6'2". The man on the card had no visible scars. The man in front of her had a faint line running along his left jaw, the kind of mark a knife leaves when it cuts deep and heals wrong. Lila felt the world tilt, felt every assumption, every certainty, every belief about what was happening drain away like water through a sieve. This was not an accident. This was not a malfunction. This was infiltration. This was enemy action. This was real. But who would believe her? Blue Team thought this was still an exercise gone wrong. Her own Red Team had been working with this imposter for 12 hours and noticed nothing. Control was not responding, and the only evidence was a dying soldier's whisper and her own observation that two men looked slightly different. She could accuse him, could pull her sidearm and order him detained, could scream the truth and hope someone listened. But Pritchard's words echoed in her memory. "Trust your eyes, not the voices, not the orders, what you see." Lila made her decision in the space between heartbeats. She handed the ID back. "Return to your position, Sergeant." He took the card, nodded, walked away. And Lila watched him go because she needed him to think she suspected nothing, needed him to believe she had accepted the lie, needed time to think and plan and figure out what the hell was actually happening in this desert valley that was supposed to be a training exercise, but had just become something infinitely more dangerous. Behind her, the medic called out, "He is gone. I am calling time of death." The specialist from Blue Team lay still in the dust, 23 years old, from Ohio as it turned out, with parents who would get a knock on the door and a folded flag and an explanation that would be lies from beginning to end. Lila looked at his body, looked at the fake Ven walking back toward the northern perimeter, looked at the radio that would not answer, looked at the 16 Blue Team soldiers and 12 Red Team soldiers who still thought this was a game. And she understood with perfect clarity that she was completely alone. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose from freezing to merely cold. Somewhere a coyote called again, that same lonely sound. Lila walked to the command post, pulled up the personnel roster on her tactical computer, found Marcus Ven's file. Every detail matched the ID card she had just examined. Height 5'11", no distinguishing marks, assigned to Creech. Current duty status, attached to exercise Grey Wolf as Red Team participant. She pulled up the photo from his personnel file, compared it to her memory of the man she had just confronted. The file photo showed a man with softer features, rounder jaw, eyes set slightly wider, not dramatically different, but different enough that if you knew what to look for, if you had spent 15 years learning to spot the details that kept you alive in hostile territory, you could see it. Someone had sent an imposter. Someone had infiltrated this exercise. Someone had killed an American soldier. And someone had made sure the communications would not work when she tried to call for help. Lila sat down at the computer terminal, pulled up the satellite view of the training range, studied the terrain, calculated distances to the nearest road, nearest base, nearest anything that resembled civilization and safety. 50 kilometers at minimum. She could walk it in maybe 12 hours if she pushed hard. Could get to someone who would listen, someone who would believe, someone who could stop whatever was unfolding here. But that meant leaving her team, meant abandoning 12 soldiers and 16 more who had no idea they were in danger, meant running while good people died. Lila Brennan was the daughter of a father who had burned alive in a tank in the Iraqi desert, was the product of foster homes and doubt, and a driving need to prove she was worth the uniform, was a woman in a profession that still, after all the progress and all the official equality, required her to be twice as good to get half the respect. She had never run from anything in her life. She was not about to start now. Instead, she pulled her Mk-12 rifle from the rack, checked the chamber, loaded a magazine of real ammunition, not blanks, not training rounds. 20 rounds of 77-grain hollow points designed to reach out past 800 meters and put holes in things that needed holes in them. She slung the rifle across her back, grabbed her combat vest with spare magazines, radio, GPS, survival kit, everything she would need to operate alone in hostile territory. Because that was what this had become, hostile territory. And she was no longer Captain Lila Brennan commanding Red Team in a training exercise. She was an operator behind enemy lines with unknown threats, unknown objectives, and the absolute certainty that whatever was happening here, it was going to get worse before it got better. She walked out of the command post into the harsh desert sun. Major Hale was standing in the village square, surrounded by his Blue Team soldiers. They had stopped the exercise, were gathered around their dead comrade. Some were angry, some were in shock. All of them were looking for answers. Hale saw her approaching. His face was stone. Captain Brennan, what the hell just happened? Lila met his eyes, weighed her words, knew that what she said next would determine whether she had any allies at all or would be facing this alone. I believe we have a problem, Major. A problem. One of my men is dead. Your sergeant shot him with live rounds in what was supposed to be a blank fire exercise. That is not a problem. That is a catastrophe. Agreed. Which is why I need you to listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you. She could see it in his expression. The resistance, the anger, the absolute conviction that this was a failure of her command, her responsibility, her fault. And maybe it was. Maybe she should have done more when she found the explosives. Maybe she should have refused the mission. Maybe a lot of things. But none of that mattered now. The man you think is Staff Sergeant Marcus Venn is not Marcus Venn. He is an imposter. I have compared his physical characteristics to his personnel file. Different height, different facial structure, different scars. Someone has infiltrated this exercise, Major. Someone has put an operative in place among my team. And I believe that operative just killed your soldier to make a point or to test response or to achieve some objective we do not yet understand. Hale stared at her, blinked once, twice, then shook his head. Captain, I understand you are under stress. This is traumatic for all of us. But what you are suggesting is paranoid conspiracy theory. This is Nevada. This is a controlled training environment. Nobody infiltrates American military exercises. Then explain the live explosives. What explosives? Sergeant Venn was planting actual C4 charges around the perimeter last night. Real ordnance. I reported it to control. They said it was authorized. Then it was authorized. Special training parameters, increased realism. Or someone wants us to believe that while they do something else entirely. Hale's patience was evaporating. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. He was a good officer, a smart officer, but he was also a man who believed in systems and chains of command and the fundamental assumption that when you were on an American base doing American training, you were safe. Lila had believed that too, right up until she watched that specialist bleed out in the dirt. Major, I need you to trust me, just for the next 10 minutes. Let me show you the personnel file. Let me show you the discrepancies. Then you can decide if I am crazy. Before he could answer, the radio at Hale's hip crackled to life. Pritchard's voice, clear and commanding. All stations, this is control. We have confirmed the casualty. Exercise Grey Wolf is suspended pending investigation. Medical examiner and military police are en route. Estimated time of arrival 6 hours. All personnel are to secure weapons, cease operations, and remain in current positions. Do not, repeat, do not attempt to leave the training area. Control out. 6 hours. Lila looked at her watch. It was 0920. That meant no help until 15:30 at the earliest. 6 hours with an infiltrator among them. 6 hours with no idea what he wanted or who he was working for or what would happen next. 6 hours that might as well be 6 years. She looked past Hale toward the northern perimeter. The man who was not Marcus Venn stood at his post, rifle in hand, face calm, watching her, knowing she knew, daring her to act. And behind him, out in the desert where the rocks and sand stretched to the horizon, she thought she saw movement. Heat shimmer maybe, or maybe more of them, waiting for whatever signal would bring this entire situation crashing down. Lila's hand moved to her rifle sling, not drawing, just touching, just reminding herself it was there. Major Hale was still talking, saying something about protocols and procedures and chain of command. But Lila was no longer listening, because she had just realized something that made her blood run cold. If someone had infiltrated the exercise, They had done it with inside knowledge. They knew the roster, knew the timing, knew the communications protocols, knew exactly when and where to insert their operative so he would blend in, be accepted, be positioned to do whatever needed doing. Which meant someone on the inside had helped them, someone with access, someone with authority, someone who might still be giving orders and making decisions and telling everyone, including her, that everything was under control. Someone like the man in the control tower who had told her the live explosives were authorized, who had delayed medical evacuation, who had just ordered everyone to stay put and wait for help that might never come. Colonel Wade Pritchard. The man who had trained her, trusted her, pushed her to be better. The man who had looked her in the eyes and told her to trust what she saw, not what she heard. Was that warning or confession, preparation or manipulation, truth or the most elegant lie ever told? Lila did not know, could not know, not yet. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty as she stood in that desert village with the sun beating down and a dead soldier cooling in the shadows and an imposter watching her from 30 meters away. She was on her own, and whatever came next, she would face it alone. The decision took less time than the thought required to make it. Lila watched Major Hale turn back to his men, watched him begin organizing them into a defensive perimeter around their dead comrade, watched him do exactly what a good officer does when confronted with chaos: impose order, establish control, protect his people. And she knew with absolute certainty that his instinct to protect would get them all killed. She did not tell him she was leaving, did not explain or justify or argue. She simply turned and walked toward the northern edge of the village, moving with the unhurried pace of someone checking perimeter defenses. Nothing unusual, nothing that would draw attention. Her Mk-12 rifle hung across her chest. Her vest carried 4 spare magazines of live ammunition, 200 meters of paracord, a combat knife that had been her father's, water purification tablets, and a GPS unit that might or might not be compromised depending on who controlled the satellites currently tracking this particular grid square of Nevada desert. Behind her, voices rose in discussion. Someone called her name. She did not turn, did not acknowledge, just kept walking until the mud brick walls blocked line of sight. Then she moved into a low crouch and accelerated into the broken terrain beyond the village perimeter. The desert swallowed her in 30 seconds. Rock outcroppings and erosion channels created a maze of natural cover. The temperature had climbed past 90 degrees despite the November date, and heat shimmer made the horizon waver like a hallucination. Lila used the terrain the way she had been trained, moving in short bounds from cover to cover, always aware of sight lines, always thinking 3 moves ahead. 200 meters out, she dropped into a wash deep enough to stand upright without being visible from the village. She paused, listened, controlled her breathing. Nothing, no pursuit, no shouts of alarm. Either they had not noticed her departure yet, or Hale had decided to let her go. Either way, she had maybe 10 minutes before someone organized a search. She climbed out of the wash on the north side and kept moving. The terrain rose gradually toward a ridgeline 800 meters from the village. High ground, observation, the tactical advantage of seeing before being seen. Her boots found purchase on loose scree, her hands caught at rock edges. Her body remembered the countless training climbs that had built the muscle memory she now relied on without thinking. 15 minutes of hard climbing brought her to a cluster of boulders just below the ridgeline. Natural fortress. 3 approaches, all visible. Excellent fields of fire back toward the village and out across the desert floor. She unslung her rifle and began setting up a hide position with the methodical efficiency of someone who had done this in mountains from Afghanistan to Colombia, to the high desert training ranges, where young soldiers learned to become old soldiers if they paid attention and got lucky. She used her knife to clear cactus and brush, arranged rocks to create a firing rest, pulled a camouflage net from her pack and draped it to break up her silhouette, built a secondary position 20 meters away in case she needed to displace quickly, cached water and ammunition at both sites. Then she settled behind her rifle, adjusted the scope, and began the patient work of observation. Through the magnified optic, the village jumped into crystal clarity. She could see individual soldiers moving between buildings, could identify Hale by his stance and the way he gestured while giving orders, could count the red team members visible on the rooftops. 12 plus herself made 13, but one of those 12 was not who he claimed to be. One of those 12 had killed an American soldier and might kill more before this day ended. She swept the scope slowly across the village, cataloging positions, noting patterns, building a mental map. Then she expanded her search to the surrounding desert, looking for what did not belong, what moved wrong, what revealed the presence of watchers or threats or the invisible machinery of whatever operation was unfolding. And there, 2,000 meters east, a glint of reflected light, gone as soon as she saw it. She adjusted her scope, increased magnification, studied the area where the flash had originated. Nothing, just rocks and sand and heat shimmer. But Lila had learned long ago that nothing was sometimes the most important something. The absence of detail in an area that should have texture. The too perfect stillness where wind should create movement. The negative space that suggested concealment. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. She marked the position on her GPS, scanned further, found another suspicious stillness at 3,000 meters south, then another northwest, a perimeter, a cordon, not tight, not obvious, but present. The village was surrounded by observers she could not quite see but knew were there with the same certainty she knew the sun would set in approximately 9 hours. This was not improvised, this was planned, coordinated, professional. Lila pulled back from the scope and considered her options. She could stay here, relatively safe, relatively hidden, and wait for the promised military police that might arrive in 6 hours or might not arrive at all. She could attempt to break through the cordon and reach help, though that would mean traveling through open desert with unknown numbers of hostiles between her and safety. Or she could do what every instinct screamed at her not to do: engage, actively interfere. Make herself a problem that had to be dealt with. The radio on her vest crackled, encrypted tactical frequency. She recognized the voice of her own team sergeant. Red Actual, Red 2. We have lost visual contact. Request your location. She did not answer. Answering would give away her position to anyone monitoring the frequency, would confirm she had abandoned her command, would provide ammunition for the argument that she was unstable, unreliable, suffering from stress-induced breakdown. But silence carried its own message. Silence said she was still out here, still operational, still a threat to whatever plan required her to be controlled or eliminated or convinced to stand down. She switched frequencies, began scanning through the spectrum, listening to the scattered transmissions of an exercise that had become something else entirely. Blue team coordinating defensive positions. Red team asking questions about the suspension of operations. Control tower issuing updates about incoming investigators. All of it normal, all of it exactly what should be happening. Then she found the other frequency. Encrypted military band but not the official exercise channel. Two voices in brief, clipped exchange using terminology that was almost right but not quite. Almost military procedure but with subtle differences that spoke of foreign training, different doctrine, different origin. Package confirmed secure. Falcon ETA 32 hours. Maintain theater until extraction. Understood, blue and red elements contained. Single outlier, no threat. Monitor outlier. Eliminate if approach vector threatens compromise. The transmission ended. Leela played it back in her mind, parsing every word. Package. Falcon. 32 hours. Something was being extracted from this location in just over a day. Something valuable enough to infiltrate a military exercise. Something worth killing for. And they considered her a single outlier, no threat, which meant they had no idea what she was capable of, or they were fatally underestimating her. Either way, she had just learned three critical pieces of information. First, whatever they wanted was still here, still in play. Second, they had a timeline, which meant they could be disrupted. Third, they thought she was contained along with everyone else. Time to prove them wrong. Leela checked her watch. 10:43 hours. The investigators were supposedly arriving at 15:30. That gave her 4 hours and 47 minutes to do something that would either save everyone in that village or get them all killed. She began planning with the cold focus of someone who had learned warfare from men who made war into art. The antenna array sat on the highest building in the village. Communications hub, linked to the outside world. Control tower relay. If she could destroy it, she would cut the official channel that was feeding false normalcy to anyone monitoring the exercise, would force a different kind of response, would create chaos in the enemy's carefully maintained theater. But shooting a stationary target from 800 meters was not the challenge. The challenge was doing it in a way that sent a message. That told Major Hale and every other soldier down there that this was not paranoia or stress or breakdown. That told them in terms impossible to misunderstand that they were in danger. She needed them to see the truth, and the only language that would penetrate their certainty that they were safe was action that could not be explained away. Leela settled into her rifle, found the antenna in her scope. A simple shot. The structure was metal framework with multiple redundant elements, but the satellite dish at the top was the primary link. One shot, properly placed, would shear the mounting bracket and send the dish tumbling to the roof below. She calculated range. 817 meters according to her laser rangefinder. Wind from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. Temperature 93 degrees. Humidity negligible. She adjusted her scope dials with the muscle memory of 10,000 previous shots, feeling the clicks under her fingers, seeing the reticle shift in tiny increments until the crosshairs settled exactly where physics and experience told her the bullet would impact. Then she waited, controlled her breathing, let her heart rate drop to 55 beats per minute, felt the stillness that comes before action, that perfect moment when thought becomes unnecessary and the body simply executes what it already knows how to do. The shot broke clean. Recoil drove back into her shoulder. The rifle barked once, the sound echoing off the rocks around her position and rolling out across the desert like distant thunder. Through the scope she watched the bullet's trace, watched it cross the distance in less than a second, watched it strike the mounting bracket exactly where she had aimed. The satellite dish tilted, held for a moment, then collapsed in a shower of bent metal and severed cables. Leela worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, loaded another round, but she did not fire again. One shot was message, multiple shots was attack. She needed them confused, not convinced she had gone hostile. In the village, soldiers scattered for cover. Training took over. React to contact. Find the threat. Return fire. But nobody knew where the shot had originated, and the only thing clearly damaged was communications equipment that might or might not have been hit accidentally by some malfunction somewhere. Leela watched Hale emerge from the building he had been using as command post, saw him look at the fallen antenna, saw him key his radio, probably trying to contact the control tower and getting only static, saw the moment when confusion shifted toward understanding that something was very wrong. Now for the second part of her message. She pulled a square of white cloth from her pack, tore it into a rectangle, used the carbon from a match to write 2 words in block letters large enough to be read from a distance. Then she attached the cloth to a 3-foot length of paracord, tied the cord to a rock, and calculated trajectory. This throw required different precision. She needed the rock to land near the destroyed antenna where someone would find it quickly. Needed it visible but not so obvious it looked planted. Natural accident of wind and physics carrying a message from nowhere. She stood, exposed herself on the ridgeline for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for anyone watching to see movement, to mark her general location, to understand she was out here. Then she threw the rock with all the strength her shoulder could generate, watched it arc through the air trailing its white flag, watched it fall toward the village. It landed on the roof, bounced once, settled against the broken antenna mount. Lila dropped back behind cover and moved immediately to her secondary position. The throw had revealed her location. Anyone competent would put rounds on that ridgeline in the next 30 seconds. She reached the backup hide just as the first bullets cracked overhead, stitching the rocks where she had been standing. Too late and too scattered to be effective, but showing that yes, someone out there had weapons and was willing to use them. She did not return fire, just waited, let the shooting stop, let the silence return, and watched through her scope as Major Devin Hale climbed onto the roof, approached the fallen antenna, and found the white cloth with its 2-word message written in carbon black. Not drill. Through the magnification, Lila saw Hale pick up the cloth, saw him read it, saw him look out toward the ridgeline where she had been standing. She could not see his expression clearly at this distance, but she could read his body language, the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his head turned slowly, scanning the desert, the moment of decision that would determine whether he believed her or dismissed her. He climbed down from the roof, disappeared into the command post. Lila kept watching, waiting, hoping she had done enough, hoping that 2 words and a destroyed antenna and a demonstration that someone out here had live ammunition and was willing to use it would penetrate the certainty that this was still somehow controlled, somehow safe, somehow just a training exercise gone temporarily wrong. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. Heat waves made the village shimmer and dance. Lila drank water from her canteen, small sips, conserving what she had because the nearest resupply was either in that village she could not approach or in a cache she did not have and could not reach. Then movement. Hale emerged with his blue team, 12 men in combat formation. They began moving north toward the ridgeline, toward her position, and Lila felt her heart sink because this meant he had not believed. This meant he thought she was the threat. This meant she had just triggered exactly the response she had hoped to avoid. They moved well. Proper spacing, proper cover discipline, proper use of terrain. Hale was leading them in a flanking approach that would bring them up on her position from 2 directions simultaneously. In 15 minutes they would be close enough to engage effectively. In 20, they would overrun her hide, and she would have to choose between shooting American soldiers or being captured by them. Neither option was acceptable. Lila began calculating routes of withdrawal when something stopped her cold. Movement in her peripheral vision. She swung her scope to the left, saw one of the blue team soldiers, a corporal she recognized from the briefing, stepping over a cluster of rocks in a draw about 400 meters from her position. Saw him move with the confidence of someone who believed the biggest danger was the crazy woman on the ridgeline, not the ground under his feet. Saw him about to step directly onto one of the pressure-triggered explosives that the false Marcus Venn had planted. Time compressed. Lila had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would define everything that followed. She could do nothing. Let the explosive detonate. Let the corporal die in a blast that would prove her point more effectively than any message. Hale would have to believe then, would have to accept that this was not training, would have to acknowledge the truth. But the corporal would be dead, legs gone at minimum, probably bled out before medical help could reach him, dead because Lila chose evidence over action, dead because she valued being right more than being fast. Her father had died in a burning tank because someone made a bad call, had screamed for help that came too late, had left a 6-year-old daughter with nothing but a folded flag, and the knowledge that the world was full of people who made bad calls that got good people killed. Lila was not going to be one of those people. She put the crosshairs on the corporal's left leg, lower thigh, meaty part, missed the bone if possible, wound that would drop him instantly but not kill him, wound that would hurt like hell but leave him alive and functional after surgery and rehab, wound that would make him hate her but let him go home to whatever family was waiting. The shot was impossible, 430 meters, moving target, downhill angle, and she was aiming to wound, not kill, which meant margin of error measured in inches. Miss high and she hits his torso. Miss low and she hits the ground. Miss left and she might sever his femoral artery. Miss right and he stays on course to step on high explosive that will not miss at all. Lila stopped thinking. Let training take over. Let muscle memory and 10,000 hours of practice make the calculations her conscious mind could not process fast enough. She led the target, accounted for his movement, felt the exact moment when everything aligned. The rifle fired. Through the scope she saw the impact. The corporal's leg buckled. He went down hard, rolling left, away from the rocks, away from the explosive. Blood on his pants but not arterial spray, not death. Just pain and shock and the absolute confusion of being shot by someone who was supposed to be on the same side. His squad reacted instantly, dove for cover, returned fire toward her position. Bullets cracked and whined off the rocks around her. Lila did not move, did not shoot back, just watched as 2 soldiers crawled to their wounded comrade, dragged him further from the rocks, began applying first aid. Watched as Major Hale Lowe crawled to the cluster of rocks the corporal had been approaching. Watched him carefully, so carefully, examine the ground. Watched him find the pressure trigger, the wiring, the cylindrical shape half buried in sand. Watched understanding finally, break through certainty. Hale's voice came over the open radio channel, tight with control, but carrying an edge that had not been there before. All blue elements cease fire. We have live ordnance in our approach path. Corporal Mendez has been shot, non-life-threatening. Shooter is on the north ridge. A pause, then different tone, questioning. Red actual, if you can hear this, why did you shoot my man? Lila keyed her handset. 4 words, no more, no less. Saved, not shot. Silence. She watched Hale through her scope, watched him look at the explosive, look at his wounded corporal, look at the distance between where the corporal had fallen and where his next step would have planted his boot directly on the trigger. 3 feet, maybe less. The difference between alive and dead, between going home with a scar and going home in a box, between Lila being right and everyone continuing to believe she was wrong. Hale keyed his radio again. This time he was not talking to her. Control, this is Blue Actual. We have confirmed presence of live ordnance in the operational area. Repeat, live ordnance, not training simulators. We have 1 friendly wounded by what I believe was protective fire. Request immediate guidance and actual medevac, not exercise response. The answer came fast, too fast, like someone had been waiting for exactly this transmission. Blue Actual Control, your report is noted. Assessment is that Red Actual has placed unauthorized explosives and is now engaging in hostile action against Blue Team. This is a breakdown of command discipline. Military police have been notified and are en route. Your orders are to withdraw to the village, establish defensive perimeter, and wait for relief. Do not pursue Red Actual. Repeat, do not pursue. She is considered unstable and dangerous. Hale's voice went flat. Control, that is not accurate. Captain Brennan just saved one of my men from stepping on an explosive that matches the description of items she reported last night. She had the shot to kill and chose not to. This does not match the profile of unstable hostile. Blue Actual, you are experiencing target fixation and stress reaction. Captain Brennan has abandoned her post, destroyed communications equipment, and wounded your soldier. Return to the village immediately. Control out. Lila listened to the exchange with growing certainty. That was not Pritchard's voice on the radio. Same frequency, same call sign, but wrong cadence, wrong phrasing, wrong something she could not quite articulate but recognized the way you recognize that a familiar room has been rearranged in the dark. Someone had taken over the control tower. Someone was giving orders in Pritchard's name. Someone was trying very hard to isolate her, contain everyone else, and maintain the fiction that this was merely a breakdown rather than enemy action. She made a decision. Switching to the emergency frequency, the one that should be monitored by every military installation within 500 miles, she broadcast in clear language with no encryption. Any station, this is Captain Lila Brennan, service number 7728419, currently operating in Nevada Test and Training Range Grid November Whiskey 49er82. Exercise Grey Wolf has been compromised by hostile infiltration. Repeat, hostile infiltration. We have enemy operators on site, live ordnance in play, one friendly KIA, one friendly wounded. Control tower has been compromised. Request immediate response from any available assets. Authentication code Brennan Juliet 73. Over. She repeated the broadcast 3 times, then waited. Static, nothing. Either nobody was listening or somebody was jamming the frequency. Either way, she had just committed herself completely, had declared mutiny against the voice claiming to be control, had painted herself as either the only person seeing clearly or the most dangerously delusional officer currently wearing the uniform. The response came on the primary tactical frequency, and this time it was Pritchard's voice. She was certain, knew it the way you know your own reflection, but what he said made her certainty waver. Captain Lila Brennan, this is Colonel Wade Pritchard. I am speaking directly from the control tower without intermediary. You have violated operational security, fired on friendly forces, destroyed critical infrastructure, and broadcast classified exercise information on unsecured channels. I am hereby relieving you of command and placing you under arrest pending court-martial. His voice changed. Harder, colder. Grey Wolf Protocol is now active. All personnel are advised. Captain Brennan is hostile, armed, and dangerous. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. I say again, weapons-free. Any station with visual contact is authorized to engage with lethal force. The words hung in the desert air like poison. Weapons-free, lethal force. 28 American soldiers had just been ordered to hunt and kill one of their own, ordered by a man she had trusted, trained under, believed in. Lila sat very still. The sun beat down. The rocks radiated heat. Somewhere far away, a jet screamed across the sky at altitude, pilots who had no idea that below them, something had broken in a fundamental way. She looked at her hands, steady, no shake, no tremor, just the hands of a woman who had just been declared an enemy of the people she had sworn to protect, just the hands that would have to pull a trigger if it came to that, would have to defend herself against soldiers who believed they were following lawful orders. Through her scope, She watched Major Hale gather his team, watched them carry their wounded corporal back toward the village, moving carefully now, aware that the ground itself might kill them. Watched them go because Hale, at least, had decided that protecting his people mattered more than following orders to hunt her. But there were others. Red Team soldiers who had been under her command an hour ago. They would follow Pritchard's orders, would come for her, would believe they were doing the right thing because the alternative, that their commander was right and the system was compromised, was too terrible to accept. Lila began withdrawing from her position, moving fast now because staying meant dying. The ridge offered good defense but no escape. She needed mobility, needed to stay ahead of the search parties, needed to survive long enough to figure out what package meant, what Falcon was, and how to stop whatever was coming in 32 hours. 31 hours and 17 minutes now. She moved down the back side of the ridge, using the terrain to mask her movement, heading deeper into the desert where the rocks gave way to sand and the distance between living and dying stretched out to the horizon. Behind her, she heard the first helicopter. Search and surveillance. They would find her hide position quickly, would mark the location, would vector ground forces to pursue. But Lila Brennan was the daughter of a tank commander who had taught her chess before she could read. Was the product of foster homes where survival meant being smarter, faster, harder than anyone expected. Was a combat controller who had called in airstrikes from mountain peaks in countries that did not officially exist, while men with bad intentions tried very hard to kill her. She knew how to be hunted, knew how to turn pursuit into trap, knew that the most dangerous thing you could do to a predator was make it think it was winning right up until the moment you proved it was prey. The desert stretched ahead, endless, pitiless, perfect. Lila smiled without humor and kept moving into the furnace of noon, a lone figure carrying a rifle and a question that would not let her rest. What was Colonel Wade Pritchard protecting, and how many people was he willing to kill to keep it secret? Behind her, the voices on the radio multiplied. Search teams organizing, grid squares being assigned, the machinery of a manhunt gearing up. Ahead of her, heat shimmer made the sand dance like water. And somewhere between the two, in the space where hunted became hunter and victim became threat, Lila found the cold clarity that had kept her alive through a dozen deployments where other people died. They wanted her contained, wanted her silent, wanted her eliminated. She was going to give them exactly the opposite. The war had just started, and they had no idea what they were facing. The desert taught patience to those who survived it and killed those who did not learn fast enough. Lila had been learning this lesson since she was 19 years old and fresh out of basic training, assigned to her first posting at Nellie's, where the instructors took young soldiers into the furnace and showed them the difference between thinking you were tough and actually being hard enough to matter. She moved through the afternoon heat like a ghost, using every fold of terrain, every shadow, every trick of light and distance that could make a human being invisible to searchers who expected their target to behave like a panicked fugitive. But Lila was not panicking, was not running blind, was calculating with the cold precision of someone who understood that survival was mathematics, not emotion. Behind her, 3 search teams were working a grid pattern, sweeping outward from her last known position on the ridge. She could track their progress by the occasional radio transmission that broke through on the frequencies she was monitoring. Professional, methodical, exactly how she would conduct the search if positions were reversed, which meant they would find her hide site within the hour, would find the spent brass from her shots, would establish a radius of possible movement based on time elapsed and terrain difficulty. And they would be wrong, because Lila was not moving away from the village. She was circling back toward it. The decision had crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity about 2 kilometers into her withdrawal. Running accomplished nothing. Hiding bought time but no resolution. The only way to stop whatever was happening, to protect the soldiers who now hunted her, to prevent the extraction of whatever package meant, was to go back, to infiltrate the very place she had just escaped, to find evidence so undeniable that even the voices on the radio could not explain it away. Insane, suicidal, tactically brilliant in the way that desperate measures sometimes are when conventional wisdom has failed completely. She found an outcropping that provided shade and concealment, drank half her remaining water, and forced herself to rest for 20 minutes while the sun hammered the landscape into submission. Her body needed the recovery. Her mind needed the stillness to plan. And somewhere in that stillness, a memory surfaced unbidden. 5 years ago, different desert, same brutal heat. She had been running a training evolution with Pritchard, just the two of them, testing a new forward observation protocol. They had been pinned down by a simulated enemy force with superior numbers and position. No way forward, no way back. The exercise controller was waiting to see what she would do. Pritchard had been sitting against a rock, sipping water, watching her calculate options with that expression he wore when he was teaching without telling you he was teaching. "What are you thinking, Brennan?" "That we are trapped, sir." "Are we?" He gestured at the desert around them. "Or are we exactly where we need to be to see what everyone else is missing?" She had not understood then, had been too focused on the tactical problem, the immediate threat, the need to escape or overcome. But Pritchard had made her sit there for another hour, just watching, until she finally saw what he had seen from the beginning. The enemy was not watching their own back door, was so focused on containing the targets in front of them that they had created a blind spot in their own position. "When everyone thinks you are wrong," Pritchard had said quietly, "either you are crazy or you are the only one seeing truth. A combat controller's job is to trust your eyes, not the voices. The voices will get you killed. Your eyes will get you home." That memory sat in her chest now like a stone. Trust your eyes, not the voices. Pritchard had been preparing her for this moment, had known somehow that she would face a situation where every authority figure, every chain of command, every voice of certainty would tell her she was wrong. And he had given her permission, years in advance, to believe herself instead. Was that the action of a traitor, or of a teacher who knew his student would need that lesson when the moment came? Lila did not know, could not know, but the memory shifted something in her understanding of what was happening. This was not random. This was not opportunistic infiltration. This was designed, orchestrated, a test or a trap or something that required her to be exactly who she was in exactly this position, making exactly these choices. She opened her eyes. The sun had moved. The shadows had lengthened. Time to move. The approach to the village took 3 hours of careful movement, using draws and gullies that kept her below the line of sight from the high points where observers would be posted. She moved in the spaces between search patterns, in the intervals when helicopters returned to base for fuel, in the blind spots that always existed in even the tightest security cordon, because human beings could not watch everywhere at once. By the time full darkness fell, she was 200 meters from the northern perimeter, close enough to hear voices, close enough to smell diesel fuel and cooking fires, close enough to be killed instantly if anyone spotted her. She waited. Let the night deepen. Let the soldiers settle into their watch routines, that dangerous comfort that comes when nothing has happened for hours and your mind starts telling you nothing will happen at all. Waited until the moon rose, thin crescent providing just enough light to navigate but not enough to make her visible at distance. Then she moved into the village like water finding cracks, flowing through the spaces where sentries were not looking, where buildings blocked sight lines, where darkness was absolute. Her camouflage merged with shadow. Her movements were silent. Her presence was invisible to everyone except herself. The command post was in the central building, exactly where it had been when this was still an exercise. Lila worked her way to the back wall, found a window that had been left partially open for ventilation, listened to the voices inside. Major Hale, two of his officers, discussing search grids and radio protocols and the general conviction that Captain Brennan had gone completely off the rails and needed to be found before she hurt herself or someone else. But underneath the official concern, Lila heard something else in Hale's voice. Doubt. The kind that comes when the evidence keeps contradicting the narrative you have been given. He had seen the explosive, had watched his man nearly step on it, had received the shot that wounded instead of killed, that saved instead of murdered. He was starting to believe, not fully, not enough to act, but enough to question. Lila filed that information away and kept moving. The building she needed was on the east side of the village. Smaller, less guarded, the structure that had housed equipment and supplies for the exercise. The place where anything valuable would be secured, because it had the only reinforced door and the only lock that required codes instead of just a latch. She approached from the blind side, using a pile of supply crates for cover. One sentry at the door. Young private, rifle held correctly, but his attention was on the radio chatter coming through his earpiece. He was listening to the hunt, listening to search teams report negative contact, listening to the excitement of a manhunt that he was missing because he had been stuck on the most boring guard post in the village. Lila could have killed him, could have slipped a knife between his ribs before he knew she was there, but killing him would prove every accusation Pritchard had made, would make her the hostile actor they believed she was, would end any possibility of redemption. So instead, she waited until his attention was completely absorbed in a radio transmission. Then she moved, covered the 5 meters between her hiding place and his position in 3 seconds. Her hand caught the back of his neck in a nerve strike that dropped him instantly into unconsciousness. She lowered him quietly to the ground, checked his pulse, confirmed he was breathing. He would wake in 10 minutes with a headache and embarrassment. He would live to tell the story. And Lila would have the time she needed. The door code was the problem. 4-digit numerical lock, 10,000 possible combinations. She did not have hours to try them systematically. But she had been Red Team commander, had been given access to the building during setup, had watched the logistics officer punch in the code while pretending not to pay attention, had filed the number away because that was what you did when you wanted to stay alive. You noticed everything and forgot nothing. 4729, she punched it in. The lock clicked open. Inside was darkness and the smell of equipment. Lila pulled a small red lens flashlight from her vest, shielded the beam with her hand and began searching. Supply crates, communications gear, medical kits, all standard, all expected, nothing worth killing for. Then she found the case. Military-grade Pelican container, black, locked with a different kind of security. Biometric scanner. This was not exercise equipment. This was something else entirely. Lila studied the case, considered her options. She could destroy it without opening it, could rig an explosive, blow it to fragments, deny the enemy whatever it contained. But that would also mean never knowing what package referred to, never understanding why people had died, never having proof of anything except destruction. The biometric scanner was the weak point. These systems had backdoors for emergency access, had override protocols in case the authorized user was injured or killed. Lila had been through enough classified briefings to know the standard military bypass. Simultaneous pressure on all 4 corners of the scanner while inputting a master code. She tried it, used her fingers to press the corners, used the butt of her knife to punch in the emergency code that was supposed to be different for every system, but somehow always came back to the same 2D default that had been in use since before she was born. 9999. The lock clicked, the case opened. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a hard drive, civilian size, consumer-grade casing, but labeled with military classification markers and a designation that made Lila's breath stop. Project Nightfall, AFTAC Targeting System, Prototype version 4.7, Classification, Top Secret SCI SAP. She knew what this was, had heard whispers about it in briefings that she was barely cleared to attend. Artificial intelligence targeting algorithms that could coordinate airstrikes across an entire theater of operations, process satellite data in real time, identify targets with accuracy that made human intelligence obsolete. The kind of technology that gave whoever possessed it a decisive advantage in any conflict. The kind of technology that foreign powers would kill for. And someone had brought it here, to a training exercise, in a case with minimal security, like they were inviting theft. No, not inviting. Testing. This was bait. Bait to identify which foreign intelligence service would take it. Bait to see how they would attempt extraction. Bait that required someone on the inside to make it believable. And Lila had just walked into the trap they had set, except she was supposed to be the hunter, not the prey. Her mind raced through implications. If this was deliberate exposure, then Pritchard knew, had approved it, had set up an entire exercise as cover for a counterintelligence operation, had put 29 American soldiers at risk to catch spies, had ordered her hunted and declared hostile to make it look real. Unless he had not. Unless the operation had been compromised from the beginning and Pritchard was actually in the dark. Unless the voice on the radio was not his. Unless everything she thought she understood was another layer of deception. Lila forced herself to think, to consider, to work the problem like Pritchard had taught her. The hard drive in front of her was the objective, the thing being extracted. But that meant the case should be empty when Falcon arrived, because whoever was running this operation needed to believe they had successfully stolen it, which meant either someone had already copied the data or they were planning to take the physical drive itself. She checked the case more carefully, found a hidden compartment in the foam. Inside was a second hard drive, identical casing, identical labeling, but this one had a small piece of tape on the back, blue tape, the kind you used to mark training equipment. A dummy, a decoy. Someone had already swapped the drives. Lila sat back on her heels. The picture was becoming clearer. Infiltrators had entered the exercise, had identified the real target, had swapped it for a fake, planning to extract the real drive when Falcon arrived, which meant the actual classified technology was already gone, already in enemy hands, already compromised. Unless she could find it, unless she could swap the swap, unless she could turn the trap back on the people who thought they had won. She pulled both hard drives from the case, examined them in the dim red light. The dummy had tape. The real one did not. She memorized every detail of the real drive. Then she placed the dummy back in the main compartment and pocketed the real one. When the infiltrators came to collect their prize, they would find the case exactly as they expected, would take the dummy drive, believing it was the real one they had already stolen, would fly away with worthless data while the actual technology stayed in American custody. Simple, elegant. The kind of reversal that would make Pritchard proud if he was actually on her side, or make him furious if he was compromised. Either way, Lila was keeping the drive. She closed the case, reset the lock, moved to the door. The sentry was still unconscious outside. She had maybe 3 minutes before he woke. She slipped out, relocated him to a more comfortable position so he would not wake with his face in the dirt, and disappeared back into the darkness. The hard drive in her vest pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, like it was a beacon broadcasting her location to every hostile within 100 miles, like it was the most important thing she had ever carried and the most dangerous. She made it 50 meters before her radio crackled with a transmission on a frequency she had not been monitoring. Private channel, encrypted, Major Hale's voice, quiet and careful. Red actual, if you are listening, key your handset twice. Trap or genuine, test or trust, Lila considered, Wade decided. She keyed twice, click click, nothing more. I found the explosive you marked on the tactical map. Found 3 more after that. You were right, about all of it. A pause. I cannot openly defy orders, but I can accidentally fail to search certain areas. I can experience communications difficulties. I can be incompetent at exactly the right moments. Another pause longer. Falcon arrives at 0800 tomorrow. Cessna Civilian Registry, filed flight plan says medical supply transport for a film crew shooting in the desert. But there is no film crew, no medical supplies, just a plane that should not be here and a pilot who will not file a return flight plan. Lila keyed once, acknowledgement, continue. I do not know how to stop it. Shooting down a civilian aircraft without proof of hostile intent will end my career and probably put me in Leavenworth, but letting it leave with whatever they came for feels like treason. His voice changed. Harder. Tell me you have a plan, Captain. Tell me you know what you are doing. Because I just committed mutiny to talk to you, and I need to believe it was for something other than a woman who cracked under pressure. Lila keyed her handset. Spoke for the first time since the message on the ridge. I have the package, the real one. They will take a decoy. When Falcon lands, I need you to keep everyone away from the landing zone. Tell them it is contaminated. Tell them there is ordnance. Tell them anything. Give me 10 minutes with that plane. And then what? Then I make a call that will bring help or end my career. Possibly both. Silence on the radio. Lila waited. Let Hale work through the decision. Let him choose whether to trust the woman everyone said was dangerous or trust his own eyes that had seen the explosives, the bodies, the evidence that something was very wrong. 10 minutes, Hale said finally. But if you are wrong, we both burn. If I am wrong, Major, burning is the least of our problems. The transmission ended. Lila moved deeper into the desert, putting distance between herself and the village, finding a position where she could observe the approach vectors for the landing zone, where she could see without being seen, where she could make the call that would either vindicate everything she had done or prove that she had destroyed her career for nothing. The night was cold now, temperature dropping toward freezing. Stars overhead like ice chips scattered across black velvet, beautiful and utterly indifferent to the small human dramas playing out below. Lila thought about her father, about the last letter he had written before the tank burned, about the line that she had memorized. Do the hard thing when it matters, not the easy thing when it is safe. She pulled the hard drive from her vest, turned it over in her hands. This was the hard thing. This was what mattered. The night passed slowly. Lila dozed in intervals, never deeper than the edge of sleep where sound or movement would snap her instantly awake. Drank the last of her water as dawn approached. Watched the sky lighten from black to purple to the pale blue that promised another day of heat and dust and decisions that would echo for years. At 0745 she heard the aircraft. Single engine, coming from the south. She glassed it through her rifle scope. Cessna 172, white with blue trim, civilian registration clearly visible, flying low, following the terrain. The kind of flight that stayed off radar, that used valleys and canyons to mask approach, that looked innocent until you understood it was anything but. The plane circled once, found the landing zone marked with smoke grenades, came in smooth and professional, touched down on the dry lake bed that had been selected for exactly this purpose, rolled to a stop, engine stayed running. Two men emerged from the village. One was the false Marcus Venn. The other was someone Lila did not recognize. They carried a case. The Pelican container she had opened hours before. They walked to the plane without hurry, without concern. Men who believed the operation had succeeded, who believed they were going home with the prize. Lila watched through her scope, watched them load the case into the plane, watched them shake hands with the pilot, watched them turn to walk back toward the village. This was the moment, the decision point, the place where everything hung in balance. She could let them go, let them fly away with the dummy drive, let them believe they had won while she kept the real prize, clean, simple, no international incident, no complications. But that would leave the infiltrators alive, would leave them free to try again, would leave the questions unanswered about who sent them, who helped them, how deep the compromise ran. Or she could make the call, the one that would bring the full weight of American military power down on this desert valley, the one that would end her career if she was wrong but might save lives if she was right. Lila pulled out her radio, switched to the emergency frequency, the one that every fighter pilot monitored, the one reserved for the worst possible situations, the one you only used when there was no other choice. She took a breath, thought about her father in his burning tank, thought about the young specialist who had bled out in the dirt, thought about every soldier who had ever trusted that the system would protect them and learned too late that trust was not enough. Then she broadcast. Broken Arrow, Broken Arrow. This is Captain Lila Brennan broadcasting in the clear. Stolen classified payload on Cessna November 7328 Bravo, currently on ground at Nevada Test and Training Range. Grid November Whiskey 5137. Aircraft preparing for departure with compromised targeting system. I am laser designating the target. Authorization code Brennan Juliet 73. This is not a drill. Repeat, Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow. The code that meant a nuclear weapon was lost or compromised. The code that triggered every emergency protocol in the military handbook. The code you never, ever used unless you were absolutely certain, because using it falsely was a federal crime that would put you in prison for the rest of your life. Lila was using it for a hard drive. She activated the laser designator on her rifle, pointed it at the Cessna. The invisible beam painted the aircraft with a mark that every military sensor within 500 miles would detect, a mark that said, "This is the target. This is the threat. This is what needs to be stopped." For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The Cessna's engine revved, the pilot preparing for takeoff, the infiltrators almost back to the village, the world continuing as if nothing had changed. Then the radio erupted. Aircraft November 7328 Bravo. This is Cobra flight of 2 F-22 Raptors currently at your 6 o'clock. Angels 20. You are painted by ground laser and flagged as hostile under Broken Arrow protocol. Shut down your engine immediately and exit the aircraft with hands visible. You have 30 seconds to comply before we engage. The Cessna's engine died. The door opened. The pilot emerged with hands up, looking at the sky, looking for the fighters he could not see but knew were there, because F-22s did not announce themselves unless they wanted you to know you had no chance. From the village, shouting, confusion, soldiers pouring out to see what was happening, Hale's voice on the radio demanding explanation, other voices demanding the same. And above it all, the sound of jet engines as two of America's most advanced fighters dropped from altitude to circle the lake bed like sharks that had just found prey. Lila stood up from her hide position, walked out into the open, rifle slung across her back, hands visible, moving toward the Cessna with the steady pace of someone who had just committed an act that was either heroism or treason and would not know which until people far above her pay grade made the decision. The infiltrators saw her coming, saw her walk past them without acknowledgement, saw her approach the Cessna where the pilot stood frozen with hands locked behind his head, saw her reach into the aircraft and pull out the Pelican case. She opened it, removed the dummy hard drive, held it up so everyone could see the blue tape on the back, the marking that said, "Training equipment, not real, decoy." Then she pulled the actual drive from her vest, held it next to the dummy, let the difference be visible, let the proof be undeniable. "This," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "is what they came for. This is what they thought they stole. This is why people died." The F-22s made another pass, low enough that everyone could see the weapons' pylons, the missiles, the promise of destruction if anyone made a wrong move. Low enough that there was no doubt this was real, this was serious. This was the moment when training became history. Major Hale arrived at a run, looked at the drives, looked at Lila, looked at the infiltrators who had frozen in place when the fighters appeared. His face went through several expressions before settling on something like respect mixed with disbelief. "You actually did it." "Yes, sir." "You called Broken Arrow on a hard drive." "Yes, sir." "You are either the craziest officer I have ever met or the bravest." He paused, "Possibly both." Lila did not answer, just stood there holding two hard drives while F-22 Raptors circled overhead and soldiers she had trained with, fought beside, been hunted by, started to understand that maybe, just maybe, the woman they had been ordered to kill had been right all along. A new voice came over the radio, calm, familiar, Colonel Wade Pritchard. "All stations, this is actual control. Cease all operations. Ground all aircraft except Cobra flight. Detain all personnel involved with the Cessna. And someone get Captain Brennan on the line right now." Hale handed her a radio. Lila keyed it. "This is Brennan." "Captain," Pritchard's voice was unreadable. "Did you just use Broken Arrow protocols to stop a Cessna?" "Yes, sir." "Do you have any idea what you have just triggered?" "Yes, sir." A pause, long enough that Lila wondered if he was deciding whether to arrest her or promote her. Then, impossibly, she heard something that might have been a laugh. "You just passed, Brennan. Congratulations." The world tilted. Lila felt something shift in her understanding of everything that had happened. Passed, not stopped an infiltration, not saved classified technology. Passed. "Sir." Gray Wolf Protocol. Actual name, Operation Cassandra. A test to determine if a single operator with no support, no authority, and no one believing them could identify and stop a hostile operation when every system was compromised. You were the test subject, Captain. The infiltration was real. The theft was real. The threat was real. But we were watching, waiting to see if you would trust yourself when everyone told you you were wrong. Lila sat down, just sat down right there on the desert floor because her legs had stopped holding her weight. You let them kill that specialist. Let him die to make it real. "No," Pritchard's voice went hard. "That was not part of the plan. That was actual enemy action that we did not anticipate. When Ven shot that soldier, the exercise became real operation. Everything after that was you saving lives, not us testing you. And the voices on the radio, the ones that were not you. Actual infiltrators who killed my communications team and took over the tower. I have been locked in a supply room for the past 18 hours listening to you save an operation I thought was blown." A pause. "You did good, Brennan. better than good. You did what no one else could have done. Lila looked at the hard drive in her hand, at the soldiers gathering around, at the F-22s that were climbing back to altitude now that the threat was contained, at the desert that had tried to kill her and failed. What happens now, sir? Now you come back, get debriefed, get medical attention for whatever you broke during this circus, get a commendation that will never appear in your official record because this operation never officially happened. His voice softened slightly. And then, if you are interested, we talk about what comes next. 3 weeks later, Lila stood in a nondescript office building in a part of Nevada that had no name on any map. The ceremony was small. Just her, Pritchard, 2 generals she did not recognize, and Major Hale, who had been quietly transferred to a position that did not officially exist. They gave her a commendation, classified, meaningless to anyone except the handful of people who would ever know what she had done. No medal to wear, no story to tell, just a piece of paper that would go in a file that would be sealed until she was dead and buried. After the ceremony, Pritchard walked her to the parking lot, handed her a folder, thin, unmarked. What is this? Satellite imagery from the southern border. Anomalous activity at a facility that should not exist. We need someone to go look. Someone who does not trust what they are told. Someone who trusts what they see. Lila looked at the folder, did not open it. Another test. No, an operation. Real one this time. No observers, no safety net, just you and whatever you find when you get there. He met her eyes. Gray Wolf Protocol is not a one-time thing, Captain. It is a program. You are the first graduate. We need you to be the template for what comes next. She should have asked questions, should have demanded details, should have done all the careful, cautious things that a sane person does when offered a mission with no support and no backup. Instead, she took the folder. When do I leave? Pritchard smiled, the expression of a teacher watching a student finally understand the lesson that had been years in the teaching. Whenever you are ready. Lila walked to her truck, threw the folder on the passenger seat, started the engine, looked in the rearview mirror at the building that held secrets she would never speak about and truths she would carry alone. In the folder, she knew, was another mission, another test, another opportunity to trust herself when everyone else said she was wrong. She pulled out of the parking lot and headed south, toward whatever came next, toward the border and the anomaly and the thing that should not exist, toward the next impossible choice that would define whether she was crazy or whether she was the only one seeing truth. The desert highway stretched ahead, empty, endless, perfect. And somewhere out there, someone was waiting to be proven wrong.